truck and SUV headquarters.
As the first coronavirus death in the United States is confirmed in Washington state, Florida Senator Marco Rubio wants China held accountable for putting the world at risk with this outbreak. He's called out Beijing for years over its treatment of the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. He says China's handling of the coronavirus is just one more example of bad behavior.
The way you deal with a global pandemic is you become transparent and you share information, beginning with the actual virus. You share the virus because researchers around the world can start working on the basis of that and developing treatments and vaccines. They didn't do that. You also share best practices. You share infection numbers. You share statistics. And the reason why you do that is so that researchers, again, all over the world and other governments can take steps and measures to adjust to that. They didn't do that.
The president, of course, first thing he did was stop flights in and out of going to China. And yet they have people locked up in their home.
The Communist Party of China is more interested in protecting their global image than they are in containing this. And that's really the fundamental challenge here. They've even intimidated the World Health Organization, which went over there and came out with this glowing review of the way they've responded to it. But now that they're out of the country, the World Health Organization, now that their experts have left, are criticizing China again, this time for not sharing numbers on how many of the healthcare workers have been infected. So it's really complicated, the response to it, both here in the U.S. and for other countries, and I think evidence of what we're dealing with when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party.
We continue to see company after company talk about disruptions in their supply chain. That's going to impact earnings. But when it comes to healthcare supply chains, this is where it really gets dicey and very dangerous for Americans, because America relies so much on China, in particular for our prescription drugs. 80% of the active ingredients in prescription drugs are coming from either China or India. How is it possible that America is so reliant on this when it comes to such an important issue as our prescription drugs?
Not only is it 80% coming from outside the country, and a significant percentage of those active ingredients are from China, but they actually come, a lot of it, from that very province, that Wuhan province, that was the origin of this crisis. And so the result of it now is that there is invariably going to be supply chain issues and disruptions. We already saw last night that there was the disclosure that we've already had our first declared drug shortage. They haven't yet, as of this moment, told us what drug it is, but it won't be the last one.
Unbelievable. So are you expecting that we will see a shortage in things like antibiotics, penicillin?
I don't want to speculate about how bad it can be, and I know steps are being taken to stockpile. I asked this question a few days ago in a hearing we had with the HHS secretary, but bottom line is I do think we are going to have some shortages, and I hope we're in a position to manage it here in terms of knowing what they are. But long term, the question is, should we rely as a nation on something as important as medicine? Should we rely so heavily on a single foreign country, particularly one who's a near-peer adversary and one who appears to be prone to these sorts of outbreaks that are disruptive?
You've also talked a lot about investing in Chinese companies and why there is so much obsession with making sure that these global indexes include all of these Chinese companies. I want to get your take on what this proposal is on the table for the thrift fund, which of course is the 401k money for military past and present, and this proposal to put 10% of that $500 billion thrift fund into the MSCI index. That index holds a lot of Chinese companies, some of which are sanctioned already. Others are creating the technology that are tracking the Uyghurs that are in camps right now in China. They are creating weapons that may very well be used against America. Do we really want our military to be funding these Chinese companies?
Well, I don't think we want that, and that's the first point, and that is from an industrial policy standpoint, we should not be using money of American federal employees like military personnel, retirees, to fund the industrial policy of a country that seeks to overtake us in critical industries. But the second is the vulnerability of it. You're seeing it now. You want to invest 10% of the retirement funds of our military personnel and other federal employees into companies in a country that's not transparent. These are not transparent companies. They do not meet the same standards as companies traded on Wall Street from the United States would. We don't know what their true numbers are. We don't know what their operations are internally. And think about the leverage that gives them. If at some point in the future, in a conflict, they decide that they're going to undervalue those shares for purposes of striking back at American retirees 20 years from now, 10 years from now, particularly those that once served in government, it would create tremendous societal pressure. It would harm our economy. It becomes a systemic risk. It's just one more example of the mistakes that have been been made over the last 20 years in viewing the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party and its practices, and that's something that really needs to be reversed. And I get it. Money managers, they want the returns that they're getting. It makes them look good, but the vulnerability it creates for our country long term is unacceptable.
So what's the answer here? I mean, how do you walk a balance of having China as a partner? We just did a phase 1 China deal, but also recognizing that China has been a bad actor on so many levels. How do we deal with that?
I think you deal with it pretty straightforward, and that is we want to interact with China. We're going to need to, because the 21st century will be defined by the relationship between the United States and China.
Right.
But in every one of our interactions with them, we are always going to act in the best interest of the United States of America. That means that if some action on their part or some action on ours runs counter to our national interest and or our national security, we don't do it. And that's the bottom line. These are not punitive measures I'm discussing. This is not about punishing China. This is about protecting the United States. And so I think that that's what we need to buy into, because I think one of the critical mistakes that was made in the last 20 years is the belief that capitalism would change China, when in fact it's China that has changed capitalism.
Yeah, Senator, do you think China is concocting plans to paralyze U.S. society before this conflict?
In the 21st century, conflict is not simply going to be a military against a military. It's going to operate in the informational realm, in the cyber realm, in electrical warfare, and all sorts of different and diplomatic pressure that we see even now, the leverage that they hold over the World Health Organization and others. Those are the new battlefields of the 21st century, and they will most certainly employ those asymmetric capabilities if the potential for conflict arises.
Senator, thank you so much for your time this morning. We so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you so
We'll be right
much.
back.